So what is design thinking? Well, like any new discipline that comes up, the first thing that happens is a bunch of gurus write conflicting books about it, and they use different terminology, and they use different diagrams, and they use different language, and if you're new to the field, it can all be quite confusing. I'm here to take all the confusion away and give you a cognitive structure by which you can then go out and read all the literature. So you see a couple of the books that I mentioned are in here. Designing for Growth and The Value Proposition are up there, but there's a bunch of other good ones as well too. Again, design thinking is a tool when you're on the right-hand side. When you're on the left-hand side, the planning side, then strategic management tools are the primary tools. Design thinking's on the right-hand side. So again, the types of methods that you use on one side is different than the methods that you use on the other side. So design thinking is a method for approaching difficult problems, sometimes referred to as wicked problems: global hunger, world hunger, climate change. I don't know, there's a lot of these just big problems that you can't just, sit in the bathroom and think of your own and go, oh, I'm going to solve that problem. Gee, why didn't any other intelligent person ever solve this problem before? Well, because it's tough. But because it's an approach to gaining insight into customers, this is why we call it human-centric. And you can't do secondary research on understanding your customers. It's like saying I'm gonna find the perfect woman by going online and asking Google about the perfect woman. Like, you don't know what the perfect woman is until you go out and you meet a lot of women and you talk to them, you get to know their names, and you find out it's like, oh, the perfect woman for me is very different than the perfect woman overall, and kind of understanding and discovering what that person wants and whether you've got a solution to that person's problems, or whether there's a good match to be made. So it's this human-centric approach that you have to do by talking to people, by interviewing people, by watching people. It's a design language for non-designers, and again, it's about search and discovery rather than planning. So the world is complex. There's many possibilities. You can look at it from different angles. But what design does, it lets you run this experiment. Again, this is deeply rooted in the scientific method. It lets you pull one string out from this ball of confusion and say, what if? What if we did it like this? And you can pull on that string. As long as you're pulling on it, it's like, oh, this is looking pretty good. Keep pulling on it. But eventually you might say, you know what? I didn't learn anything by doing that, or I learned that this isn't going to work. Start over again and pull a different thread. So design thinking is a way of looking at a mass of confusion, and lets you run these experiments with things. So there's three aspects of design thinking. The first one is the method itself, and there's lots of different methods. There's the Designing for Growth method. Stanford D School has a method. Value Proposition Design has a method. Strashik Center for Entrepreneurship has its own method that I'll show you later on. St. Gallen's, the Reggio approach. There's lots of different methods, lots of different gurus, and they all kind of use different language. I'm going to try to give you a cognitive structure by which you can understand how all of these methods are the same, or at least similar. Second thing you need is multidisciplinary teams. This is a team sport. The first thing you do is you have to understand yourself and each member of the team. We talk about these T-shaped profiles where you've got deep domain expertise but broad collaboration skills. So ideally you've got maybe one person who's really good with graphics, maybe somebody else who's really good with science and technology, maybe somebody else who's really good at talking to customers and things like that. A good balance of gender, of ethnic backgrounds, of scientific backgrounds, that you got people, again, that have these deep areas of expertise and understanding, but also broad levels of collaboration. And the third thing you need is what we call a creative space. Here at the Strashik Center, we've got the Creative Hall, the Steelcase Hall, designed in collaboration with Steelcase. It's a great place to do this kind of stuff at. Not everybody has that kind of luck, I guess, to have this kind of space. Most people teach classes in classrooms with, the chairs are nailed to the floor and you got a table in front of you, and everyone has to sit at their thing and watch the teacher, the sage on the stage. So design thinking is meant to take place in a more creative environment. And here's an example of what one looks like. So what we're trying to do is get this information out of our individual heads and onto a shared space that every member of the team can interact with. So let me give you an example. Let's say you're on a 5-person team, and each team is going to interview 10 people. We're going to do 50 interviews. That's not a lot in the overall scheme of things, but here's the problem. If the 5 of us sit around a table, and the first person looks at their notes and reads to their notes, the other people take their own private notes, and the next person talks and everybody takes notes, and the next person talks and everybody takes notes, by the time the second person is halfway through their list, I've already forgotten half of the first person. You just can't remember it all. It just isn't possible. Human beings cannot remember 50 things. It's beyond our capacity. We're lucky if we can remember 5 or 6 or 7 things. So what design thinking does is it gets this out of your head and into this shared environment, as we see here. And now we can use things like color, placement, size, figures to be able to take this rich information and to make this information in a way that we can all interact with at the same time. And you can do things like say, I met this woman called Cheryl, and she's kind of similar to this person, so I'm going to put this piece of information physically close to the other one and maybe use the same color of Post-it note. And now I can maybe label these 5 or 6 people as all being representative of a certain kind of customer persona or a certain kind of an archetype or something like that. So again, the methodology lets you interact with the information in a way that exceeds the human consciousness limitations of just remembering things. Like, I can't remember 50 things, now I'm gonna go solve world hunger. Well, good luck. You just can't keep it all in your head. And so this is a technique for getting it out, manipulating the information, turning that information into other types of information, and then moving on from there. So the second aspect of this is this idea of different modes of thinking. There's divergent thinking, where you're creating choices. You're brainstorming, like, I don't know, I'm selling dirndls. Well, they could be blue, they could be green, they could be Bavarian, they could be more traditional, they could be more modern, they could be for weddings, and you're like, I'm expanding the range of choices too much. Then you have to do some convergent thinking and make some choices. Okay, we're gonna focus on dirndls for middle-aged Bavarian women who they're buying not their first dirndl, but they're buying, their 20th dirndl or something like that. It's a choice that you have to make. We're not going to sell to tourists. We're going to sell to traditional, more elderly Bavarian women. Maybe it's the wrong choice, but you still have to make a choice. And so you're always, when you're going through the process, are we expanding the range of choices, or are we working on a tool that's condensing these ranges of choices? And so if you look at a kind of an abstract version of the design thinking process, we get what's called this double diamond. That you do divergent thinking around what's the problem, some convergent thinking around what's the problem, until you nail it. This is the thing. I'm not going to sell dirndls to all women, only middle-aged Bavarian women. What's the problem they're trying to solve? They are going to a wedding or a fancy event of some sort, and they need something that kind of sort of works with all their other clothes, but it's something new and different that is, I don't know, makes them look good is the insight. That, middle-aged women, they want to look stylish, and so they want something that's flattering to their figure because they're not 20 anymore. So that's the problem that we're trying to fix. Now let's build some solutions around that. Well, maybe it's not just dirndls, maybe it's all the other stuff that goes with the tracht. Maybe we have certain kinds of designers and not other kinds of designers. But we start, there's a wide range of different solutions. Maybe we can come into your home. Maybe it's online. Maybe it's a physical store. Maybe it's a network of stores. Maybe it's a platform for sharing of dirndls, or I don't know. But we do some divergent thinking around solutions, and then let's pick one and make a prototype. For whatever reason, we've chosen that it's going to be we come to you rather than you come to us, and we're going to do a custom dirndl fitting just for you, and I don't know. That's my solution that I'm coming up with. But again, you've got this divergent thinking, convergent thinking to identify a problem, and then divergent, convergent thinking around a solution. So this is kind of an abstract version, and you can kind of see some of the tools around here, like empathize and observe, and the 2D matrix, a customer journey map, the point of view tool. There's a bunch of tools that you would use as you go along from left to right. So this is kind of an abstract, generic version of the design thinking methodology. Any of these tools from any of these techniques, though, all map onto this double diamond. So you see now what I've done is I've taken that double diamond and I've mapped on there, here's the tools from value proposition design, here's the tools from designing for growth. And so now you can go through any book from any guru, from any website, and understand, okay, here's what they're doing. And again, it's all a compilation of either a divergent tool or a convergent tool. Either diverging, converging around problems, or diverging, converging around solutions. So they're kind of sort of all the same in many ways, even though they use different shapes and sizes, and some go left to right and some go right to left. And don't get confused by that. The other thing I wanted to mention is that coming up with solutions is tough. That it's not just desirable from the customer's point of view, but also the business is viable. You can make a profit at it, or if it's a nonprofit, that the nonprofit is viable. Somehow the nonprofit is able to generate enough revenues to be able to deliver the services that it wants. And of course, the technology has to be feasible as well too. So in many cases, you're designing a new product, the product has to be feasible. So it's tough. There's a lot of iterations that go on. And again, embrace the difficulty. If it was easy, somebody on the other side of the planet would do it for one fraction of the cost. Here's a quote around that, specifically by Tim Brown, who came out of IDEO, one of the earliest inventors of the whole methodology. So some of the key understandings I want to make sure I leave you with is that this is an emotional, human-centric, empathetic approach. Once you start getting into the quantitative, iterative testing phase, that's when lean startup really, really shines. But on the design thinking phase, it's about get to know real people. Get out of the building and talk to real people, and then get into this process of rapid prototype, test, iterate, change, iterate, change, iterate, change, and the speed of execution usually beats the time and effort that you spend on any particular step. So don't take too long on any one step. Kind of move along, make your mistakes, then go back and iterate again. So some of the key values around this, again, that I talked about earlier, but I wanted to reinforce: be proactive. Don't just sit back and wait for people to talk to you. Don't just think that you're going to learn something by sending out a survey. You got to get out of the building and talk to people. Then you've got to make these prototypes and create something. Create, whether it's a brochure or a website or a prototype, build something and then show that to the other person. Don't just talk to the other person. Build these connections, find these partners to work with, and leverage the theory. I did want to add one specific thing, just because I've been teaching this for 10 years now, and I've seen a lot of students make a lot of mistakes on this. And so here's a couple of the most obvious mistakes that students tend to make. The first one is, don't just make up a customer persona. The customer persona should be based on the real people that you've interviewed. So if you've interviewed 50 people, which 5 of those are middle-aged Bavarian ladies that are all looking to solve the same problem? Don't just make up a middle-aged Bavarian lady like I did, and then go out there and go, oh, here's somebody, you look like a middle-aged Bavarian lady, oh, now you're my customer prototype, or you're my customer persona. That the customer profile or the customer persona should be built up from the data, not out of your head, because you probably don't know middle-aged Bavarian women as well as you think you do. Or even worse, you think you do, and you think that they're all alike. And as soon as you start interviewing them, you realize they're all different, and they're all different in different ways, and which aspects of them are similar enough as to be meaningful. Second one is, again, don't just make up a journey map. Oh, well, the way that middle-aged Bavarian ladies pick dirndls is, well, first thing they do is they walk into a store, and then the next thing they do is they try on some clothes, and then they buy. It's like, you've actually never talked to anybody about this before, have you? That the journey the journey map that you create should be based on the data. And so, what's that thing that causes this lady to walk into the store in the first place? Is the first thing they do walk into a store? Or is maybe the first thing they do some keyword searching online? Or is the first thing they do talk to somebody else? Or maybe the spark is they're at a wedding and they're looking at their old dirndl that they wore to Oktoberfest with beer stains all over it, and they're looking at everybody else going, oh, gee, they look much younger even though they're older than me, and and then suddenly that's the thing that sparks them to go out and cause this journey of buying a dirndl. And if you don't understand the thing that sparks it, what the process is associated with it, it's not just that they try on clothes, but there's this interaction with the store staff, and what does that look like? And so if you try to impose your own made-up journey onto somebody else, you're going to be missing a large piece of this. And ideally, you're using these user stories, you're using these examples of real people to give you these compelling journeys that you can build a business around. The last thing I wanted to mention is surveys are really easy to do. People love to do them. Oh, I posted a survey to Facebook, and everyone said they liked my idea. Yeah, but the only people that you really reached out to on Facebook were probably your buddies. So the data might not be that valid. It's a very limited target audience because it's all people that you happen to have known through Facebook. And it's hard to get insights from surveys because surveys are inherently quantitative, and you're trying to get these qualitative, emotional-laden information. And surveys are good for validating. They're lousy for gaining insights. So when you're going through this design thinking process, just be very careful about how you use these tools. That you're basing it on real people, and you're using the tools based on real people rather than kind of superimposing your own mental map on what you think reality looks like. Last comment I wanted to make is this idea of the need for speed. Why does an airplane fly? Actually, I stole this from Klaus Zeiler. Thanks, Klaus. An airplane flies because it's moving. And as soon as it stops moving, everybody dies. And it's ugly. So if you're like not moving, then you're like an airplane that's crashing. And so if you're moving, if you're gaining traction, if you're making things happen, then people want to join your team. People want to work with you. So if you interview somebody on Monday and they tell you about what they're interested in or what they're not interested in, you go back to them within a week, they're like, well, that's pretty good. You took my feedback, you took it to the next level. You do this 3, 4, 5 times, and suddenly they're a customer. Because again, I'm selling dirndls. Like by the time I've shown you 5 different versions of a dirndl, by the time I showed you the 5th one, you're like, that's perfect, that's exactly what I want. Well, so it's also kind of a way of building customers. But more importantly, like if you're just a little startup company and everything's slow and everything takes a long time, then nobody wants to work with you. Like by the time that you talk to them, by the time you talk to somebody about a partnership and then you talk to them a second time, if a month has gone by, they've forgotten your name. And so the fact that you're making things happen and you're gaining this traction and that you're moving, other people join your cause, other people want to work with you, other people provide you with resources, and suddenly you can take off and fly. So I'm going to leave you with this gaping void thing that entrepreneurship, to be taught, must be unleashed. So I wish you the best of success in this master's degree program, and I release you to go out into the world and cause havoc.